Did I get this to click? Here we go. All right. So these are all kind of some of those terminologies, and really one of the things we're going to strive for in this class is to have the data to back up why you tell somebody to do something. Like when you tell a student or an athlete, I want you to change how you throw this ball because, and you're going to have the numbers and the data to say it rather than just say, because I said so. You'll know exactly why. So that's kind of where we're going with our stuff today. So we're going to talk about all these things here. These 6 are the thing you need to know pretty much as the main part of this one. Is what all those terms mean and how those are all applied together, which is what our in-class assignment is going to be about today. So the 6 main ways you're going to describe human motion is kinematics and kinetics. So those are the forces on the body and the body produces. Linear and angular motion, then statics and dynamics. So how to quantify movement. That's the fun stuff of biomechanics is we actually try to put numbers on things. That's why we did the video recordings the other day and you tried to put the angles of the whatever sport you were doing, how far back the leg went to kick, the mechanics for shooting a basketball, the lifts that you were doing in the weight room. All those are different parts of quantifying movement that we're trying to go for with our labs that we're going to be doing. So we want to have more numbers when it comes to a weight room than how much can they lift. We want to know how fast is each repetition, what velocity are they moving at, how much force are they using in order to create this, and then you can, by getting your velocity, force, and power, you can create a force, velocity, power profile. That was about a 20-minute video of how to do that I did not get all the way through. I still might make you watch it later. And then as I was continuing my research, you kind of have a relationship between how much force you can apply to how much velocity you can apply. And I've seen that chart before. But what I hadn't seen was all these different lifts and how ones are much closer to how much force and the other one how fast you can do something. So the velocity compared to the force and where that kind of goes along there. So you may or may not know what all of those are. You may not be able to read them. And then this was another one here. The blue is the part that they have tested, and then the reds are kind of hypothetical thoughts or hypothetical loads are in between there. And you're going to read that paper tomorrow after we record our stuff. So you're going to get more of these details later. And they're very well. There was 121 resources at the end of that research paper. I was like, holy cow, that's a lot. So kinematics describe motion, so how something is moving. So this can be a sequence of movements or for different body segments, or measuring key variables of distance, velocity, acceleration, how fast that bat is moving. We tried that with the rackets the other day. The longer the racket, the more velocity you could get, the more acceleration it got, created more power on the birdie to hit it across the room. So kinetics would be the forces that create motion and generate it from moving. So this would be the ground force reaction. So you would measure this with the force plate, how much friction something has, how much torque you have on that joint as you're throwing the ball or hitting a golf ball with. And then like internal muscle forces, like you could actually measure individual muscles and how much torque, how much pressure you're putting on those muscles. And as a PT, you're going to be taking that knowledge and being like, which muscles can I improve to make this person be able to be back to normal? When I had my shoulder injury, I had this guy, he was a DPT, he was a younger guy, so he wasn't too much older than me. He was only a year or two out of school. And he was older than he was younger, than all the other like PTAs or PTs that he had there. And I was trying to get my arm to be able to lift up. And at the time, I had a torn labrum, and I couldn't lift my arm past about here. And I don't know what he did, but he knew which muscle or muscle group needed help. He pressed somewhere on the edge of my scapula, and I went, what did you just do? So those are the kinetics, the forces around, the internal muscle forces to make the muscle do what it needs to do. So here's another way of thinking about this. So kinematics would be how fast the ball goes. So what launch angle it has, how far it distance. Those would be the kinematics. The mechanics concerned with the motion of the object without any references to the forces which cause it. So kinetics, on the other hand, is the study of the forces that are acting on an object for a particular type of mechanism. Who knows what is the world record for the 100-meter dash? I think it was 9:69. I'm not sure. We'll see if I'm right here. I just had it on the slide here a little bit ago. So, how fast would somebody have to run a 100 meters in 9.58 seconds? So the time would be 9.58 seconds. The speed would be these here, and then velocity is distance over time. So you'd multiply all those together to get 10.44 miles per hour. Or I guess this one's meters per second. Probably meters per second. You'd have to convert that to miles per hour. But those are the things that we are working on here with our kinematics that we would be working on here. So a couple other ones would be linear motion and angular motion. So linear is going to be forward. So that would be dead straight, nothing else. Not going up and down, or not left and right. Angular would be spinning on an axis. So a great one is figure skating because there's very little friction on their skates. So you can just measure how many rotations per second they're doing. It's really interesting that men are doing quads in their skating routines now. So they're doing 4 rotations around in one jump. And all the forces that it takes to do that. I do remember seeing in the Winter Olympics last time, they said how many how many seconds they were in the air compared to all 4 rotations that they would have to do. Like those are the angular momentum kinematics that you would have there. So kinematics and kinetics can be used to describe and define human motion in linear and angular formats. So the movement of an object is classified in these 3. And then the third one here is the general motion. So this is a mix of linear and angular motions. So I want you to tell the person next to you what you think is a good example of general motion. That would be linear and angular together. Go. All right, David, what did you come up with back there? Golf swing? A lot more angular than linear, but on the right track. Let's see. Ethan, what did you guys come up with?
I was wondering, I was asking this, but linear motion, is skating be a linear motion?
Straight skating, yeah.
Like skating in a straight line. Yes.
Skating in a straight line would be a linear motion.
And then like going back and forth, like half would be angular?
Both, actually. That would be general. If you're doing like a skateboarder or a rollerblading, the X Games kind of stuff, that is both linear and angular. That would be a general motion because you're doing rotations and going in a straight line and going up. Any other different ones? I heard you guys in the front here. What did you guys come up with? Correct. You had yours is actually the same as mine. I thought it was like, did she see did I hit the button too fast or something? I was like, that would be both. That's a very simple one. Just going around a corner. That's where I thought you were going to go with skating in a straight line. I was going to be like, oh, skating in a circle. That's what I thought you were going to say next. Anybody else come up with a good one? All right, so the main terminology here, again, it's I say this about pretty much every book. Some different books are going to have different ways of describing something, so just know what this book's term is. So linear motion describes something going in a straight line. It can also be called linear translation. If you remember good old maths class, you used to have to translate an object when you were doing probably geometry class. This comes from my geometry days, where you'd take like 4 points of a square and I'd say translate this to this point. And you'd have to add or subtract to move it at an angle up. So it'd be like 3 over and 2 up for the whole square. And you have to tell me all 4 coordinates. That was called translation. So sometimes you're going to hear it called that as well. So it could be all parts of an object, or the athlete moved the whole distance. It's in the same direction and in the same time frames. So angular motion would be swinging something around in a circle. A great one is, I forget what this one's called. It's not shot put, it's not discus. What's this one called? Hammer throw. That's the only one I've never done. I've done all the other ones in like track and field days and stuff. You're the one talking out there. Close the door on somebody talking in the hallway there. And then angular momentum. And I love this as a whole terminology there. So angular momentum is the sum of the local term and then the remote term. So it would be how far the knee, the ankle, and everything is moving in order to quantify how hard somebody kicks the ball. One of your classmates last year did how far back the foot went compared to how fast they kicked it. It was one of the research projects that they did at the end of the year. So I'll say many terms can refer to angular motion. A lot of coaches will say athletes rotating, spinning, swinging, circling, turning, rolling, pirouetting, somersaulting, twisting. Probably my favorite general motion one would be a gymnastics tumbling pass. Because you are going in a straight line, and then you're also using angular momentum to do back handspring, back tuck. That's my favorite general motion thing there. So to produce angular motion, the movement has to occur around some sort of axis. So all human motion is best described as general motion because it's usually a combo of the both, which we have there. Open a Word document on your computer just before we keep going on to the next topic here because you're going to need it. What am I doing on time? 20 minutes. So statics and dynamics. So this one's probably a new term. You've probably heard the other two before in other classes. This one's probably a little newer to most of you. So static describes a motion that is a constant state. So you sitting here are technically in a constant state of motion in one place. Though if you want to get really technical, you are in the middle of an angular motion because the Earth is rotating out however many feet per second. So technically you are moving statically the same spot on the Earth at a certain speed. If you want to get really technical. This can include things as constant velocity when you are not moving at all or at rest, or it can be a constant state as you are in a no movement thing. Dynamic would be a motion that is undergoing change or varying. So this could be things like increasing your velocity. Some would call that acceleration. So when you start running, you run, you're going to go faster. So that would be a dynamic change. Static would be a constant speed. How fast somebody runs, how fast the ball moves. Those are all part of static or dynamic motion. All right, so here's the project here. You need to, on a piece of paper here, I'm going to scoot ahead here. You're going to tell the person next to you you're going to work with somebody, and you're going to list several qualitative, quantitative measures, linear and angular kinematics and kinetics, and then static and dynamics of this athlete. So you're going to use all 6 of those, and I want you to basically describe them all as they pertain to this. To this one? Oh, I'm going to go back to it in just a second. We're going to watch the video and then come back to it. I actually jumped ahead.
Samantha Kinghorn showed how quick this track is over 1 lap for wheelchair racers. Brent Lakatos, based at Loughborough, married to Steph Reed, who was in the long jump yesterday. And Lakatos has gone out well, but on his inside, tracking him, Nathan Maguire in the T54 category. White helmet, blue sleeves. Lakatos leading, but Maguire has the stagger in his favour around the final bend. So there's some experience in these 2 racers. Maguire going well, but Lakatos now starts to drive for the line. A very experienced competitor. Brent Lakatos takes it 50.21. Maguire second. And it's still...
Anybody hear they said that person was in the long or the high jump yesterday? They're doing wheelchair sprinting and high jump yesterday? That's interesting. By the way, that would be a really fascinating field that you could actually go into with an exercise science degree, is wheelchair fitting. There's I saw 3 parts, 20-minute videos each of how to fit an athlete to a wheelchair. I'm like, that would be a fun field to be a part of. If I were going to do like a doctorate in PT, that's what I would want to do with it. Is like that kind of thing. All right, so taking that example, type, and it's best, I say, talk with somebody next to you, but both of you type it out because you're both going to turn it in. Qualitative, quantitative, linear, angular, kinematics, and kinetics, and static and dynamics of that action. Wheelchair racing. Say, best done with a partner. That was the 400 meter. All right, I'll let you finish that up later since I only got a couple minutes here to finish up. So here's an example of those static and dynamics there.
So when you're climbing, there's 2 easy ways to classify almost all the motion: static motion and dynamic motion. The critical difference being static motion is slow, typically more fluid, very controlled, and dynamic motion often involves more power, more momentum. It's kind of the speed at which you're doing these moves. A dynamic move, you're going to be moving from balance through a position of unbalance to another position of balance, kind of tossing your body a little bit, moving with momentum. In a static move, you'll be controlled the whole time, always moving while your body's within balance, kind of allowing you to almost undo that move the same way you would do it. How you know when you need to use a static move or dynamic move depends certainly on what type of climbing you're doing, where the handholds are, the size of the handholds, lots of variables. One important one being where your center of gravity is. You'll need to use a dynamic move if you have to move your center of gravity outside your base of support, meaning you might be reaching beyond where your feet are. Maybe that handhold is too far for you to get to by just pulling up and keeping your body in that position. You need a little bit more momentum to move that center of gravity.
Right, we're going to keep on going there. I'm low on time there. So there's a good example of it's kind of slow and steady or explosive is another way of describing those 2. So how these things kind of go into something like resistance training. So there's different kinds of different devices that we use in, let's say, the weight room. And those cause a kinetic force on the muscular system, and they can have a different kind of response. Remember, kinetics are the forces, kinematics is the motion. The book has a total ton of examples, like 3 or 4 paragraphs each one describing this. So I totally recommend read the book on this chapter. It's actually kind of interesting to me. So you'd have like your machine weight kind of exercises over there. Those would be like the ones on the far side. Your free weights would have different forces depending on where you hold them. So think about your straight arm raises as you're going in different directions, out and then up. There's going to be different kinematics, different forces. You can have an isometric exercise, wall sits. You could have variable weight machines. Those things are really interesting, where they're stronger going, or where it's like 80% on the way up, and then it'll like change to make it harder, 120% on the way down, so you have to like flex against it. Those are really interesting. This one here's a hydraulic exercise machine. So this would be more of, it gives you a steady amount of pressure depending on, or if you press hard, you're only going to be able to move it at a certain rate depending on how hard you push. If you guys notice that on most of our weight machines, there's a thing called a cam. So it's actually the circumference of this is not actually dead centers where the rotation is. It's going to be off-centered so that as you're doing, let's say, a leg extension, it's going to be harder and easier depending on how that cam is set up. So the rotation of that carries the length of the radius of that axis, and that's going to change the amount of resistance torque that the weight machine is going to give you. So you'll notice that on most of those machines in there have something along those lines. So the most common reason for taking measurement in sports is for the sport performance level. So measurements in those sports identify what a sport-related injury has happened or is becoming common. And so by establishing relevant and reliable measures, this information can predict future athletic potential. You see a lot about that when it comes to the draft. And they do, like let's just take the football combine. They take a 225 weight and they say, how many times can this person bench press 225? That's the standard rate that they do. And they'll use that. Or the 40-yard dash. It's still funny to see. I saw a video the other day that Tom Brady, 20 years later, can run a faster 40 than he did in his NFL combine. Which I thought was really hilarious. Like, the 44-year-old guy can do better than he did at 21 or something like that, or 22. Forgot which one this was.
Musculoskeletal through to neurological conditions, and is looking in the dealing with knee instability.
So, lack of time here. He basically is explaining how an ACL brace works. Why it puts something at the front of the knee, because most people tear their ACLs when they're decelerating. So it actually supports the knee on the front so that that ACL cannot overextend, because most people, when they stop, their knee overextends forward, and that's what tears their ACL. So that brace has the top here and the back here are the main parts of the ACL brace. And that's what he goes on to explain there. And he does it with a whole lot more interestingness, these kind of things here, because there's the ACL with them going kind of front to back there. Not exactly, but close enough. Say most people tear it by rotational forces going around it. And so we're going to keep on going. So the other one is you need to be accurate as possible when it comes to your measurements. So when we do our lab tomorrow, you want to do your best to make it as accurate as possible. So when you're drawing the lines on there with your app, you want it to be as accurate as you can. So does the measurement actually measure what we're trying to measure? And is it a valid measure of what we want to know? Like, how much is this person able to lift? Do the angles measure up? Or are you trying to measure why this person may or may not be feeling pain during this motion? Those are other things that could be a part of that. So a measurement can be reliable but not valid, or valid and not reliable. So valid measure needs to be accurate, the measure variable, and for the measure to be reliable, the instrument or device needs to produce the same measurement every time. I was really excited when I saw the Jump app that I purchased last year for this class. Now uses AI to determine it rather than you taking scrolling the video and say, here's the takeoff time and then here's the landing time. It's going to do it all for you now, so that means it's going to be more reliable and more valid measurement comparatively to a force plate is what those are kind of compared to. Again, running out of time. That guy has a really fun accent there. So for the lab tomorrow and your final paper, one of the things that you're going to want to do is figure out ways to consistently measure to make your testing reliable that you're going to be working towards. And then here's all the things that we went over today. And I'm done. That's all we have time for. Have a great day. See you all.